Hey, so at the time of writing this script, I have plans to go on vacation for a couple of weeks, and since I don't want to leave you guys without any content while I'm away, I decided to start up this little review series. Basically what this is I'm gonna be watching every Studio Ghibli movie in chronological order, one at a time, and writing out my thoughts about each one of them as I finish. This series isn't meant to be all that analytical. I'm sure you could find way more in-depth videos about every one of the movies I'll be watching, so just, do that. I really just wanted to document how I feel about each of these films, and I figured it would be a fun little series to start for the channel. I was also thinking it would be really fun if you guys watched along with me. I'm gonna be setting these videos to upload at set times while I'm away, so I'll put a schedule for when each part in the series will be uploaded in the description. That way everybody can, follow along. Since at the time of writing this, I'm trying to stockpile as many of these as I can, this series is gonna be pretty light in terms of editing, so I hope you guys can forgive me for that. Anyway, a little background on me and why I chose to make this series about Studio Ghibli specifically. When I was a kid, I watched several of their movies without even realizing that they were from the same studio, and although my memory is very fuzzy since it was so long ago to the point that I barely remember anything from the movies that I have seen, I do know that I enjoyed what I saw quite a bit. I've also recently been trying to watch a lot of cinematic classics, the stuff that really had an influence on the art form at large. Some of you guys will remember how I made a vow to watch every film written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, a challenge which I have now accomplished, by the way, and one which I enjoyed quite a lot. And of course, there are very few animated studios more influential than Ghibli, so I figured this was a perfect opportunity. Also, this will not be a spoiler-free series, so that's just one more reason to watch these movies before you watch the videos. But with that said, let's get started with the first movie released under the mantle of Studio Ghibli, Tenku no Shiro Laputa, or Castle in the Sky, which came out in 1986. I liked this movie, it was a lot of fun. If I had to point to one part of the film as my favorite, I'd probably have to say the presentation. This movie is really gorgeous. For one, the simple character designs are great for animating. I especially loved watching Ponzu climb just anything and everything. Like seriously, this kid can grip stuff like Link from Breath of the Wild. There's so much precision put into where each of his limbs are and where he's holding his weight that you really feel the effort that he's putting into keeping from falling. I also loved every time the Volocite crystal lit up and the primary light source shifted from the ambient light to the light from the stone. That was really pretty. And then there's also the famous Rolling Hills animated background sequence when they're flying in the little wingy pods, which is just astoundingly beautiful. Like, for whatever reason, I just haven't seen any really good looking animated backgrounds for a while, so this was an absolute treat. And even when the backgrounds aren't moving, they still look fantastic. The whole 19th century mining town setting of the first act was probably my favorite location in the movie just because of how rustic and dense the whole place is. I think one of the biggest reasons a lot of people say that all anime looks the same nowadays is because of the rise in making background art digitally. Since it's more time efficient to use a pattern brush with just a few different colors, a lot of shows just end up lacking a real unique aesthetic, but back when they all had to be hand-drawn and painted, this really wasn't the case. This might seem kind of minor, but I also really loved everyone's costume designs. Like, Sheeta had, 3 or 4 different outfits, and they all looked fantastic. On the subject of clothes, I also thought it was hilarious when the pirate guy and the big dude from the town Pazu lives in had the whole contest over who could rip up their outfit more just by flexing their muscles. Cause I watched Dumbbell Nankilo Moteru when it came out, and I didn't get around to finishing the first season until recently, and in that show there's a running gag about how the main character's personal trainer looks like the most generic anime pretty boy you could think of, but he'll just randomly get the urge to flex, and when he does, he just triples in size and rips out of all of his clothes, and it's hilarious. And then later in the series, the main character is arm wrestling, and she accidentally goes Kaioken times 1000 and rips her arm out of her sleeve. And now I'm watching characters from over 3 decades ago do the same thing, and I'm wondering if there's a hierarchy of anime characters' strength levels based solely on how much of their clothing they can remove just by flexing. Very meta, I know. I also really loved the audio experience of this movie. The soundtrack was great, effects were great, voice acting was great, etc. Pazu's trumpet playing at the beginning of the movie characterized him perfectly in a way that dialogue just really couldn't. It's mostly because of the context he's playing it in, but he starts playing for a split second, then pauses before playing the song in full. That was adorable. It was super realistic, and it subtly demonstrated the care and effort that Pazu puts into his work. I will note that the audio seemed weirdly inconsistent at times. I definitely remember there being more than one scene where I felt like there should have been background music, but it was just silent other than the dialogue. There was also one moment in the movie where I remember a character's mouth moving, but no sound coming out of it. It only lasted a second, but I was still a little confused. In terms of characters, you could probably already tell I liked Pazu and Shita, but what I think is really interesting is that neither of them really has a super complex and compelling backstory. We don't even get a flashback sequence. They just exposit the information in dialogue, but whereas I'd find this kind of thing boring and lazy in other shows, I actually found it very refreshing in this movie. This was because the primary reason I liked these two had nothing to do with their backstories, but rather everything to do with their personalities. Pazu is shown to be incredibly disciplined, helpful, and considerate, and Shita shares many of these qualities. There's this one moment in the first act when Pazu tells Shita that he'll take over shoveling coal into the engine of the train that they're riding in, and Shita says, "No, I want to be helpful," and I just instantly was on board with these two as the leads. It just goes to show how you don't need a super deep and intellectual story to make a good product when your characters have strong enough personalities to carry the emotional narrative. Speaking of, the pirates were also a great addition to the cast. They had tons of personality, and it was super heartwarming watching them transition from the people hunting Shita down to taking her and Pazu under their wing. I'm hilarious. No, but seriously, I really liked them, though it did feel super weird when all of these fully adult men were like obviously attracted to Shita, who's like 12 or 13. I mean, I get it, they're pirates, they aren't good people, but like this happens at the point in the story where the viewer is supposed to be warming up to them. It was just kinda I mean, I'm not saying this is a morally wrong thing to put in a work of fiction, because, you know, it's fiction, but it definitely didn't make me like Dola's gang more. Though Dola herself was actually really great. She was obviously constructed as a supporting character. She's kind of the Yoda to Pazu's Luke in a sense, and I think their dynamic felt very natural and genuine. I'd say the weakest character would have to be Muska, the main antagonist, because he was really just very surface level and had zero personality. Dude wants to find Lapita so he can use the Volucite crystal to gain control of the giant laser cannon that the city has, presumably just for the sake of being all powerful. Which is a fine motivation, but like the movie treats it sort of like a mystery. We don't really find out why he wants to track down Lapita until the final act, and it's just a big laser and a bunch of robots. I think part of why these types of antagonists don't really do much for me is that they're commonly already in a position of power before they even fully accomplish their goals. It's kind of like how I feel towards CEOs of giant megacorporations who just make millions of dollars every year, but still consistently try to make more and more money. Like at some point, you know the money just has no value to these people, so why do you even feel an incentive to keep making more of it? That's kind of how I feel towards these types of characters. Ironically though, my least favorite part of Castle in the Sky would have to be the castle in the sky. It was super cool watching Shita and Pazu explore it when they first landed on it, but then the military and Muska arrive and the Volucite crystal stops feeling as much like this mystical relic and starts feeling more like a TV remote, and it just kind of gives whoever holds it control over Lapita. It wasn't that this was a negative development in the story, it's just that I found it more captivating when we didn't really have a full understanding of what the crystal and Lapita did. Overall, I think this was a really good movie. It was a pretty simple story, but it didn't feel like it was trying to be anything more. I'd give it a strong 6, maybe a light 7 out of 10. Definitely a good start for this studio. Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you'll tune in for the next installment of Watching Every Ghibli Movie, where I'll be talking about Hotaru no Haka, or Grave of the Fireflies. Once again, this series is being made before I go on vacation, and it'll be uploaded at specific times when I'm gone, so check the description for when each part is coming out, and maybe you can watch along with me. Let me know what you thought of Castle in the Sky down in the comments, along with what you think about this whole watching every movie from a certain studio idea. Do you think I should do it for more studios or directors or writers or whatever? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anyway, have a wonderful day, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.